Hi, welcome to part 2 of our discussion of programmer-defined methods. So this discussion revolves around the idea of method overloading. So you're going to find yourself in a situation from time to time where you come up with a great name for a method and you want to reuse that name. But the problem is you've already defined one method with the same name. So the question is that okay or is that not okay? And the answer is, it depends. So let me give you an example to show you what I mean. Let's say you come up with a method for adding. Public static int add, and you're going to add two numbers, x and int y. And I'm just going to shorten this code so that I can display more code on the same page. So I'm just going to say return x plus y. And that's perfectly valid syntax, but I don't like to do it that way because it's much easier to debug code when you have that int result inside the method. So, and I'll explain that some other time. So what happens if your programmers, the programmers that you're working with say, hey man, this is a great method, this add method is so awesome, I'm using it all over the place in my main program. I'm wondering, could you create another method that adds 3 numbers instead of 2 numbers? Is that possible? And so the answer is, it is possible. And then the question might come to your mind, well, should I change the name of this method here, add, to add2 when I create another method, add, which adds 3 numbers. So I'd have add2 for add 2 numbers and add3 for add 3 numbers. Well, it seems kind of a shame to have to do that. It would just be nice if you could just have the method called add, which adds 2 numbers, and in the same method called add again, which adds 3 numbers. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So the question is, could I do this? Public static int add int x, int y, and int z. Is this legal? X plus y plus z. So what do you think? Do you think this would be legal for Java to allow you to define 2 methods with the exact same name but a different number of parameters? So what I want you to do is take a moment to speculate on this. Think about it and see what you come up with. So the question is it legal or is it not? It's sort of a 50-50, but if you're going to pick one, you need to pick some kind of reason. For example, if you think it's illegal, you need to have a reason why it's illegal. If you think it's legal, you need to have some kind of reason that makes sense for why it's legal. This is my thinking music. All right, enough of that. So if you said it was legal, you'd be correct. And here's the reasoning behind that. If in my main program, we'll say this is the code for the main program, I said system out println add 5, 3, which method do you think Java would choose to match that invocation of add? All right, do you think it would be the first method add or the second method add? And what makes the most sense is that it would be the first method add, because that method add only takes 2 arguments or has 2 parameters. And then if I did a system out print line, add 5, 3, 2, well, in this case, since I have 3 arguments, the second add method is going to get invoked because that add method has 3 parameters. So what Java will do is it will allow you to have the same method, a method with the same name multiple times. So you can have the same name over and over and over again, as long as you do something with the arguments to distinguish one method from the other. Now, an interesting question that might be occurring to you is why would it do that? And so I just want to reiterate the idea that you may come up with a really good name for a method, like add, and you want to reuse that name over and over again for different sets of arguments for that method. And that's why you do it. We even had an example a couple days ago when we were talking about the math library of routines of methods that's provided, predefined methods that's provided by Java. And we saw that there are about 4 or 5 different ABS methods, the absolute value methods, which worked differently depending on which argument type you passed in. So for example, let me just go to the next page to give you an example of that. There was a if you created an int x equals 3, then you could do a system out print line math.abs x, and this math.abs takes an int as an argument and returns an int once the abs has executed. And if I say, well, I don't want to say int for the next example, but I could say long y equals 4, system out print line math.abs y. And in this case, since I'm passing a long in, the math.abs is going to return a long. So there's different chunks of code, different methods that are getting executed for these 2 absolute value methods. This first one that's getting executed is an abs method that deals with ints. And the second one is an abs method that deals with longs. And the code that's present in both these abs methods can be very, very different because they're 2 completely different methods that are getting executed, one for ints and one for longs. Now the odds are the code's going to be very similar, especially for these 2, but they don't have to be. So, hey, that's it for this particular discussion. So I just want to go back to the name here, method overloading. The reason why this topic is called method overloading is because when you have several methods with the same name, it's called overloading the method. And the thing that distinguishes the methods from each other are the arguments that you pass in or the parameters associated with the method. I feel like I should add one more thing to this just to make sure you understand how this method overloading works. And that's one more example. So I'm going to flip over to another example. What if I had this? What if I defined a method public public static int, let's just call it crazy, and it's going to take an int x and an int y, And what it's going to do is it's going to return x plus y. All right, so it's a lot like the add example that I just gave you, but I'm going to create another one, public static int crazy int x int y. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, what I want to do is I want to say, actually I'll have you do this. This is good coding practice. For the second crazy method, what I want to do is I want it to multiply x and y together if x is negative or y is negative. So if x is negative or y is negative, I want it to multiply the x and y together. All right, so I want you to write the code to make that happen inside the second crazy method. I'll give you a moment to do it. And while you're writing the code in your notes, I'll give you some pleasant themed oriented music. Thank goodness you can't see me dancing here. All right, if you're not done yet, press pause and finish it up, and then I'll show you the code that I would have written. All right, the code you should write should look something like this. If x is less than 0, or y is less than 0, then return x times y. And then we'll put return x plus y otherwise. I could have put that in an else statement, but I'm running out of space, and because this return will get executed if x is less than 0 and y is less than 0, we'll actually exit the method. So we don't need to put an else to deal with this return, because if we don't get into this chunk of code, we're going to execute this chunk of code. All right, so if you're remembering, again, I just want to remind you why we're doing this. I'm trying to demonstrate the idea of method overloading. And I have two interesting methods here. The first method, crazy, you know what just happened is, speaking of crazy, I'm dealing with the really irritating features of Windows. There we go. All right, now it's upside down, which is so much fun. Let's try this again. There we go. One more time. Okay. So we're dealing with the situation where we have two variables, x and y. We're passing them into crazy, and we either want it to multiply. You know what?